Thank you all so much for joining us for Open Future Forum. This is our second day of our 3-day virtual forum. It's been so wonderful and interesting seeing the different level of light in people's backgrounds as we've had a very global group gathering here. The intent of Open Future Forum has really been both, as I spoke to it yesterday, a culmination and a spark. There are so many of you here who we've been working with over the last 2 years, some of you more the last few months. And what we've found really fascinating in yesterday's sessions was that even when we got to talking theory, we realized that everyone in the room has something that they're very meaningfully working on. There's so much practice here, and it's been such a wonderful breath to bring together that practice into then kind of this community swell to help kind of be seen and understand one another's challenges and opportunities and cross-pollinate in that way as we then kind of continue on into that space of doing. And so thank you all for taking the time this morning to participate in this kickoff. I'll be brief here, but I do want to, before passing it along to Miguel, who will be bringing us through our opening for today, thank our co-conveners of Open Future Forum. First, I'd like to thank our sponsor for today's programming, which is focused on hunger, food systems, and regenerative agriculture, North Carolina Agricultural and Technical State University, as well as our co-conveners, the American Sustainable Business Network, Bluefin Investment, Eco Restoration Alliance, El Puente, Global Unity, the Guild of Future Architects, Heartland P5, Imagine World, the Institute of Ecotechnics, Intergen Family, Kinship Earth, Partnerships for Change, Pro-Social World, Reconsider, Toxic Free Futures for Our Children, and the Triangle Foundation. Next, I'm going to pass it off to Miguel Rivera from Guild of Future Architects to drop us in this morning. We're so thrilled to be partnering with the Guild of Future Architects on these opening sessions this week, as well as some of our other curation. We've found the work and the vision of the Guild to be so resonant. At its core, future architecture is a values-based collaborative approach to actualizing systemic change. Handing it off to you now, Miguel.
Thank you, Caitlin, and greetings to everybody wherever you may be on this planet. I know we have participants on many continents, also on hemispheres. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Or if I'm speaking into yesterday, I'll speak into yesterday or tomorrow, right? You know how this planet works. One of my teachers used to say good morning at all hours of the day. And then I realized the sun is always rising somewhere, and it's always setting somewhere, and it's always noon somewhere, and it's always midnight. So we're in this very interesting spinning process, cycle process. What I wanted to talk about today is about 2.5 years ago, at the height of the Black Lives Matter, I was asked to go downtown LA to do a prayer or an invocation for one of the big demonstrations against the LAPD. And then I realized it's a really important issue to address from a different perspective. And I realized when I started speaking to the folks there, I said, we are here today because our ancestors did not know how to get along with each other. So, and I don't want to be here again 30 years from now, seeing my grandchildren doing the same thing. So what do we need to do? What do we need to change? I realized that the anger that was being expressed there it was okay to feel it. It was okay to express it, but it was not okay to suppress it, take it out on ourselves and on myself, or take it out on each other. But we had to create a vehicle safe enough to express the truth of what was happening in the moment, right? So it's really important to understand how to come together in a way that we can actually see each other for how we are connected to source. I've been performing weddings for 40 plus years, and there's always a wedding where somebody from one religious tradition marries from another person from a different religious tradition. And to solve the issue, one of my friends said, you know, my people are not going to like the woman that I'm in love with, so I want you to do the wedding because you have to figure out how to make the prayer. So in the prayer, I realized I started thinking about working my way backwards. And I realized that creation stories from all over the world start the same way. In the beginning, there was nothing but the potential for manifestation. And if you work your way back down to nothing when everybody's present, who can argue with nothing? Right? So the irony is that essence or source from where we come from, it's all the same. It manifests itself in many different ways. One of my friends, a poet from Guatemala who's no longer alive, his name was Humberto Acabal, said this: roots tell us through the flowers what the earth is like on the inside. Las raíces nos mandan a contar por medio de las flores como la tierra es por dentro. So this is what we're doing here today, is figuring out what our roots are all the way to source, and then bringing that expression to the table and having it collaborate with each other to create the new world, the new way of being. And it's going to take many generations to unwind from the craziness that we're in today. So today I've been working a lot with mentoring different groups for the better part of 40 years. I live in California now, even though I'm originally from Guatemala. I've traveled all over the United States and different parts of the world. And art is a great way to break boundaries and create communion and also create relationships. So I'm going to share poetry is one of the ways in which we do that. Also making food and sharing dance and song is another way. So this morning I'm going to read a poem by Deborah Miranda, who's native here from California, and it's called Ghost Road Song, dedicated to her father. I need a song. I need a song like a river, cool and dark and wet, like a battered old oak, gnarled bark, bitter acorns, a song like a dragonfly, shimmer, hover, swerve, like embers too hot to touch. I need a song like my father's hands, scarred, calloused, blunt, a song like a wheel, like June rain, seep of solstice, tang of waking earth. I need a song like a seed, a hard and shiny promise, a song like ashes, gritty, fine, scattered, a song like abalone, tough as stone, smooth as a ripple at the edge of the bay. I need a song so soft it won't sting my wounds, so true no anger can blunt it, so deep no one can mine it. I need a song with a heart wrapped in barbed wire. I need a song that sheds no tears. I need a song that sobs. I need a song that skates along the edge of black ice, howls with coyotes, a song with a good set of lungs, a song that won't give out, give up, give in, give way. I need a song with guts. I need a song like lightning, just one blaze of insight. I need a song like a hurricane, spiral winds of chaos, a snake charming song, a bullshit busting song, a shut up and listen to the creator song. I need a song that rears up its head like a granite peak and greets the eastern sky. I need a song small enough to fit in my pocket, big enough to wrap around the wide shoulders of my grief. Big enough to wrap around the wide shoulders of my grief. A song with a melody like thunder, chords that won't get lost, rhythm that can't steal away. I need a song that forgives my lack of voice. I need a song that forgives my lack of forgiveness. I need a song so right that the first note splinters me like crystal, spits the shards out into the universe like sleek seedlings of stars. Yes, that's the song that I need. The song to accompany you on your first steps along the Milky Way. That song with ragged edges, a worn out sun. The song that lets a burnt red rim slip away into the Pacific, leaves my throat healed at last. That's the song that I need. This is Ghost Road Song by Deborah Miranda. So the prompt here today is, how do you feel your anger, your grief? How do you feel with what's going on in the world, right? And how we can change and learn from that to see what the message is so we need to change. So I pass it on to you, Caitlin. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Miguel. Do you have any particular invocation that you would like to share from that for folks to think about as we send us off into some breakouts for a moment?
I think the grief is important to address, and also the anger, and how to transform it into something, a creative expression, because that to me is an opening. And we have to be able to get through there's pain. I feel there's anger in the culture because there's pain, and there's pain because something happened to the essence. So we have to get through we can't get stuck in the anger or the pain, but we have to reclaim our essence in some form. So this is, to me, is the road the road to our core. So how do we get back to our core and be able to tell the stories? A lot of times what's important is to know what happened and to be able to see what happened and not necessarily fix it right away, but just to know what occurred, right? And just state the fact. That's important. Some people say it's the root of all cruelty to know what occurs but ignore the fact. So it is important to be able to tell your story.
Mm. Thank you. All right. At that, I'm going to send everyone into breakouts for about 15 to 20 minutes. We'll kind of sense check when we're partway through. And then we'll do a little bit of harvest together when we return. So sending you off together now. Hello, welcome back. Welcome back, everyone. See some good faces here. I'm looking forward to hearing about your experience. I'll let a few more folks stream back in. Does anyone have a particular reflection from your breakout that you feel called to share? Anyone? Yeah, Chris?
I wanted to say, people asked about, Naisha was with us and she wasn't with us yesterday, and she asked us about yesterday. And I think it's an opportunity. I just wanted to share an observation about yesterday and today, and linking, what Miguel was saying, as a statement to draw it together. And I thought yesterday was very powerful, and it was we are a tribe that's come together to do something significantly because of you, Caitlin, and Jamaica. But it's a pleasure to be with everybody. But one of the sentiments that was voiced yesterday, and a completely understandable one, which I have great fundamental sympathy for, was a statement, and Charlie made it, but many people made it, about the problem with money. And and Miguel's talking about anger and unresolved things, and money was named, and understandably, it's tied to the idea of what, the anger. It's clearly there's a link. But one of the things that Jamaica talked about yesterday was what, the sorts of who was present and the diversity of present, but who was absent in the room. And what I felt was yesterday, I come from an investment banking background and from that money world, and I'm very much part of this tribe, but there's a voice from that world that wasn't present here. In part, there's an aspect to which it's seen as the enemy, or it's caused the problem, and so forth. And so I felt that there's a way, and we talked about, another thing that was talked about yesterday was energy in the world, or signaling and current as a current, and Naisha was saying this, that, you know, I think that we need to have an open conversation about, and we did it yesterday, about money, rather than being anti-money. Money in its beginning is a signaling tool, and it is other things that has caused problems, but how we signal with each other. And we're here, a lot of the conversations, we want money or capital or so forth to come in at the same time as we're saying we're anti-money and this tribe, and there's a bridge that we need to build and understand holistic, you know, so that we own the energy and we can use the signaling. And that's something that we were talking about. Joanna was talking about it through her mission, which is planetary Tao, you know, the functioning of money as that alien thing that we want, and to reintegrate it in the constructive way that we need to in this conversation. And that was sort of what we were talking about. So hopefully thank you, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Well, we have some very tactical money conversations today and tomorrow. So looking forward to opening that up. Elliot.
Very impressed with everyone. Matt, although we didn't get to hear too deeply from each person, but I was really blown away. I only heard and perhaps some jumping gun if he'll be presenting later today, but Eric had talked about in his home. I live in Toronto as well, so, and he used to live here, and he mentioned that in his home, he was with vertical farming, growing enough food to feed 3 families, and as well as his own. And for me, that was just, okay, wow, how do we maybe that's a little game to use that language, maybe it's a little extractive to think, but like, how do we duplicate that and get that everywhere? I was just so blown away, so keen to learn more, but I was so taken with that, and I think that can be a really powerful thing to share knowledge around.
Excellent. Naisha, did you have something?
Just incredibly excited, like looking around this room, realizing I wasn't with all of you yesterday, but I feel like I just stepped into a really powerful vortex. So thank you for that. And I'm also just feeling really excited about conversations with people that I know nothing about, but know it's a critical piece to my vision coming to life, or our vision coming to life. And so I'm really excited to connect with all of you. So thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other reflections?
The group that we were in, we were amazed at how many people are all doing the same thing everywhere in different parts of the globe, which I think is remarkable. But the other thing, basically on something that I forget who said it, but what's important is to realize that when the Europeans came over to this part of the world, the Americas, one of the things that blew them away is the natives' response. The Europeans call the natives uncivilized, but the response from the natives was, how can you call us uncivilized when you control the food, and how can you let your people starve? To the natives in particular, that was a huge sign of uncivilized behavior, the fact they control the food. They could not understand how the food could be controlled in that way, locked up. So I think we're getting at a level of that we cannot hoard. Nature does not hoard. And so we have to figure out what natural law is and figure out how to get in synchronized with that rhythm. And so that to me is a very interesting distinction. It's a semantic distinction, but really critical in terms of how you perceive the world around you, and especially around, since the conversation was talking about money, right? But if you approach it from the point of view that how can you possibly let people starve? How can you lock up the food? It's that to me is a sign of a consciousness that has to be cultivated so that would not happen. Should not happen.
Thank you, Miguel. Anyone else? Just giving it one more moment.
I can mention just quickly. Hi everyone, I'm here, Charles in Zurich. Yeah, just one thing that came up I thought is worth sharing is back to the prompt or the theme of the pain and the anger and the word that I use is like navigating a lot, so navigating that path or that journey. But the idea of, I guess there's different levels. I mean, this came up in our breakout conversation about awareness of the source of the anger and informing what to do with it, and the process of growing that awareness. You know, whether it's there at all or not, or you know, there's sort of different levels and also points along a moving path to the process of growing that awareness, and then what to do, harnessing that energy. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good morning. What you just said, Charles, evoked something that I was thinking yesterday that I forgot until this moment. And someone in one of our conversations yesterday said that we must come from love and not from fear, which is something that I think all of us understand, you know, and probably say and agree with. Yet in this movement of serving the evolution of our system and helping foster new ways of being, so many of the efforts that we are part of and we see are not coming from what we know are the emotions that we all know are the ones that must drive us. And it comes down to managing our emotions, and not managing, but becoming emotionally mature and emotionally the more loving person in the dynamic. And that's something that requires deep self-reflection and work that we must do collectively, and especially with the leadership and power, you might say, or those who have authority. I won't say that they're necessarily powerful, often acting like children. We must also be the adults in the room, which also becomes a matter of maturity and love and patience and fortitude and all those things. So I think all of you can probably finish these sentences for me. But I just really was profoundly moved yesterday that how central that is. Along these lines, how many novel and brilliant initiatives have you seen that did not work out because the leadership of those initiatives did not deal with their emotions or know how to relate to each other properly? So it's that simple. And I found myself saying in a listening gathering after listening for about 3 hours, that all we need to do is go back to that book, that everything we learned in kindergarten is what we really need to put into the middle of our activities. And I think the world will be a lot better place. So I think I speak the obvious, but I feel it's important to say. I look forward to seeing you all throughout the day.
Thanks a lot, Gregory and Charles, because there was also something that came up in our group, was that anger is something obviously that we can tap to also, right, as an energy. And also, yeah, me, obviously, I'm also angry, and there's grief, and we all have these different emotions. But we talked about how can we actually surpass that. And as you were saying, like, love is like one of the like really really good and positive ways how to do that. And we put this in the context of climate change and also food insecurity as the topic is today. And because in the group we we were several people which are doing projects actually in Uganda, and there's lots of, like, let's say, struggles right around the world, right, when it comes to injustice and so on. And yeah, we can be angry, but in the end of the day, how can we flip that? How can we shift that anger into something positive? How can we harness it? And we were talking about really different ways to see it as, yeah, anger can also be some sort of guest who can be here, but we can also let it go in the end of the day and say, hey, we learned something and let's move on. Let's move on towards some goal in the end of the day. So that was something that we discussed. Thanks.
I do need to respond, but not because of what you said, Jeffrey, but I just realized that I did leave out the grief and the anger and the sadness and the despair. Thank you for what you said, brother. I have found that so many of us that have been working so hard with our time and energy for the last 20, 30 years, 10 years, 5 years, have not achieved what we thought we would have achieved in this movement. And it's a moment of great grief for a lot of us. And I think having all of those feelings is obviously who we are as humans. And it's about what it is that I mean, we all know what I'm trying to say. It's that we have to feel all of it, but also come from the intention of anger and how do we use anger in a healthy way? How do we use our grief in a healthy way? And those are the things that I know we're all learning, and I'm growing and learning, and thank God I have a therapist, you know. So I just needed to make sure that was understood, that I wasn't just saying it's only focusing on the happy feelings.
No, I mean, if I may jump in here right now, there's one of my teachers was really this is kind of interesting sidetrack, but it's important. He was asking one day, he said to me, do you know the difference between feeling and emotion? And I said, no, because I didn't want to get into trouble with him. And he said, feeling is biology. Emotion is biology and biography. Okay. This is a loaded answer. So you have to really think about that. Biology and biography. So biographical events that we have inherited, not only from the traditions and the families, but in the cultures that we live in. And also how the cultures that we have inherited have basically created complex relationships and compromise in some ways our biology. And put on top of that all the cultural and political institutions that are creating even more conditions onto how we are as human beings. For us as human beings, we have to think of ourselves as beings first, and then men and women and everything in between second, and then come all the ethnic and socioeconomic brackets, right? So the way to get to some common ground, you have to have very strong anchor points that allow you to navigate this territory, because you're getting rid of old maps. You know, that quote by Alfred Korzybski, the map is not the territory. So we're in this territory of the unknown versus unknowingness. This is important to know. And what are you going to create? So we go back to archetypal energies, right? Restore a relationship to fire, restore a relationship to water, to earth, and to air. And then invoke the archetypal energies, because our archetypal energies are not just symbols, they're not just metaphors, and not academic positions, but they're living, breathing human beings. And for us in particular, I say this because I work with people that are very troubled, in and out of the armed forces, in and out of gangs, in and out of prison, in and out of rehab, right? And so you have to create a strong anchor point. For most people, they're not conceived under ideal circumstances. So you have to put a blessing in there so that you understand that you belong in this world without any question at all whatsoever. I'll tell you a very short story. When we started hanging out with the Native American elders, one of the younger teachers that they sent out to work with us here in LA was getting a little cranky and started to making threats to the group. So I called my adopted grandfather in New Mexico and I said, what are we doing? He said, come out here and I'll fix it for you. So we get into Stone People's Lodge, or commonly known as the Sweat Lodge. And he said this, and I was 27 years old when I heard that. He goes, whatever is going to come after you is going to have to go through me first. Whatever is going to come after you is going to have to go through me first. I had never heard that in a way explicitly directed at me in my life ever. And to this day, I think about that and I realize most of us have never had that experience in our lives. If we do it, it's very rare. So you have to have a sense of how are you protected, how are you loved unconditionally. And then when those markers get put in place, we begin to deal with everything else. But the truth, anger is part of the affect system. If you study depth psychology, and you realize there's positive, negative, and neutral effects, right? And all of them, biologically, you have to go through all of them. And it's important not to suppress the affects. Because when you suppress them, it creates all kinds of backups. Anger is used by to create a boundary or state of need. So it's a healthy thing, but you have to move through it. You can't hang on to it. It's toxic, but it's important as an alarm system. Anyway, so sorry, but I feel like this is important, Gregory, because you realize the longevity of the work is at stake here if we don't address these issues at the right level, because we have to go deep enough to sit in that ground. Otherwise, our grandchildren are going to be basically in the same position that we are in right now.
Thank you, Miguel. Well, I see others have had their hands raised, but Melanie Carlone here is actually going to close us out this morning with some words as we head into today's, as we channel this particular dialogue then into specifically how we'll apply it in hunger and food systems and nutrition. So over to you, Melanie.
Thank you so much. What an honor. And hello, everyone. So good to see old faces, new ones. So I'm a physical therapist of many, many years, trained in the military, lived overseas in Africa and Asia, so a lot of multicultural experience. And what I want to bring to us as we move into the next phase of this beautiful gathering are two things. The first one, if you don't know this was such a gift to me in virtual space, but up to the right of your image in the 3 dots, if you pull that down and you hide your self-view, you'll have the experience of being not looking in the mirror as we're talking to each other. And there's just something very powerful about that. So maybe you'll spread that. That's my little gift to you. Maybe you'll spread and share that with others, just hiding your self-view. The other one is this understanding, and Miguel, thank you so much for bringing up my actual prompt question was, what does it take to use suffering as awakening and a springboard into transformation? And that's not just suffering generic, but your suffering. So what I have seen over the 30 years as a PT is chronic general inflammation went from being maybe 1 in 100 back in the 80s to every person that walks through my door has some form, or someone in their circle, some form of chronic general inflammation, because the whole world's on fire. The whole world's hot. But here's what I've really learned is that people don't look for change, unfortunately. Now, some do, but in general, don't look for change, for dramatic change in their life until there's contrast, any kind of contrast. And once contrast shows up, all of a sudden we're awakened. Our animal bodies have come to life. Our alert amygdala, everything comes to life. What's going on here? So in the dance with pain and suffering that I see every day in the clients that come to me is that seed of opportunity to take what pain frequently turns into suffering, which is optional, but we don't know it. And again, based on our biology and our biography and where the two intermingle, what does it take for you personally to actually recognize suffering, be present to it, and now see where that contrast can lead into a doorway for things to be very different than they were before? I think anybody who's worked in the healthcare field and has seen the opportunity that arises when the veil is thin and people are hurting is really touched and moved by that. So I know both as individuals, we're learning to deal with trauma as it comes up. We had an awesome talk in our breakout room, Charles shared, and Hart, where stress and suffering have been levers into change. So I just ask you, just with no answer, I don't know that we have time, that's okay. Where does the suffering in your life get transformed? And so the second gift I want to give you, there's all kinds of really cool hacks for us to be able to recognize when we're suffering and shift the biology. So a very simple one I love teaching people is feeling your breath come into your low back ribs above your belt line. If you take a breath right now and you let the low back push outward as you breathe. One, you'll probably feel it's difficult, challenging, you haven't really done it. But as you practice this, and I invite you to do it throughout the day, you're going to notice you deeply oxygenate, you breathe deeper, more than you would otherwise. And there's a calming of the nervous system. The whole vagal system calms. So hiding yourself so you don't look in the mirror, breathing into your low back, and just keep bringing forward my own suffering, the anger that arises, whatever. How is that a transformation? How does that contrast become a lever? And so that's just what I want to leave you with as we walk into this beautiful day. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Melanie. Thank you all. Thank you, Miguel, for opening us so beautifully today. For those who didn't have a chance to jump in and share, we'll have other opportunities throughout the day, and I hope you'll be able to join us. We actually have a very appropriate session later today on communicating across ideological divides that I think could be a lovely space for the expansion of the particular conversation we had this morning. As we head off into our next sessions, we'll have a session in the same room up next, Global Roundtable of Bioregional Demonstration Projects. And I'm just going to bring us quickly through the schedule for today too, so you can kind of plan and arrange your day. You should all be on the calendar invites as well that list all of these sessions if you RSVP'd. And as well, we have a space with a full calendar in the Open Impact platform. If you followed your RSVP kind of instructions and set up a profile, that'll have some space for ongoing dialogue between you all as well. And so after this morning's global roundtable from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Pacific, where we'll be sharing a global array of bioregional demonstration projects, we'll then have a session on funding from farm to table from 10 to 11:30 a.m. Pacific. From 11:30 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. Pacific, we'll have food justice and community resilience. From 12:30 to 2, we'll be convening a center for regeneration. And so that will be a kind of a live invitation and design charrette into a new initiative. And then from 2 to 3:30, we'll have 2 different options, a workshop on Regenerate America and the Farm Bill, and a session facilitated by our partners at Reconsider on communicating across ideological divides. And then we'll be closing out the day from 3:30 to 5 Pacific for those who are able to still be awake then, depending on your time zone, on food systems, wellness, and nutrition. So that's the setup for the day. And I'm going to hit stop on this recording and then restart it in a moment so we can kick it into our bioregional roundtable.